Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining my South Coast Veterinary Management Solutions webinar today. I'm so excited to have Grace Ursery on board with us. She's going to be talking about financial transparency with the teams, which I'm really excited to hear about. Thank you all again for joining live, or if you're watching this on my YouTube channel later, then that was wonderful. I won't see you then, so you can watch it on your own. I do appreciate all of your time and everybody spending time with me. In case you don't know me, my name is Melissa Tompkins Lewis. I am the owner of South Coast Veterinary Management Solutions, and I host these webinars monthly, the second Thursday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. And so my wonderful friend Grace Ursery is going to be speaking about the financial transparency, as I just mentioned. I've known Grace for a long time, I think 10 plus years now. She has been a practice manager for many years, and I've known her throughout her journey of becoming a CVPM and all the things that she's done over the past several years. So I'm very excited to have her on my channel, and I'm going to go ahead and let her take away her discussion. So thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Like Melissa said, my name's Grace. The and Melissa and I definitely go back more than 10 years because she actually, I think, was one of the people that I leaned on to start my CBPM process. And in honor of Melissa, I wore my kitty cat shirt today too. So you mean something to each other when you know what shirt to wear. But let me get started on just introducing myself to all of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting in person. Hopefully, I'll see you guys one of these days soon at a conference. And if you are at a conference anywhere that I'm at, please come up and say hello. Um, so a little bit about me. I came from the clinical side of medicine. I started as an RVT in emergency medicine, went from RVT to a CVPM working as a practice manager, and been in the GP and specialty areas, also companion and mixed animal practices. I've seen the corporate side, I've seen the private practice side. So I feel like I've been in a lot of different pockets of veterinary medicine, not every single crevice, but one of the things that I have noticed over my span in veterinary medicine is the area where we either choose to or out of maybe a little bit of apprehension, we tend to turn away from is managing our finances in our practices or talking about our finances in our practices. Today, we're going to be really focusing on talking and sharing about our practice finances amongst our team members. So that's kind of where I landed over the course of my career is like I became really comfortable talking about this stuff. So that's how I decided to start my own business called Vet Money Geek. It's veterinary medicine. It's all about money, and I totally like to geek out on all these little things about the financial world and the economic world and how everything intermixes within our profession. So a little bit on the personal side about me, I've got a really cool kid that is super into sports, which is great because I'm super into sports. I think I love all the LA teams. So whether it's LA Galaxy or LAFC and the Rams and Kings, so forth, and the Dodgers, I probably watch something of everything. When I get a weekend off, I do like to go hit the beach and play some volleyball. And I went to UCLA, so I also follow a lot of the UCLA athletics as well. Um, so the main thing that I want everybody to always think about when they get apprehensive about talking about money, and again, this can be in your personal life, but it also can be in your work life, is that we want to recognize that money does not guarantee and buy you happiness, but having money does give you options. And particularly in our professional space, having access to some financial capital does give you some options in our businesses for success. So, um, so financial transparency. First, let's just establish why should we bother? Because maybe this happens in the quote unquote back office. Why does the front of the house? Why does our client-facing teams, why do our associate doctors need to know? Isn't this something that really is just reserved for ownership or equity stakeholders? That's the only people that need to know. When you think about it, taking a step into your personal space, when have you ever made a decision without knowing any numbers? And that decision could be, should I move houses? Should I adopt and should I adopt a dog or a cat? Now, definitely within our space, a lot of people argue like, no, it was just so cute, or well, it was like the most pathetic thing, and it came in and it's just covered in mange, and who else is going to take it home? But there's still always an element of a number that came into play with their decision making. So when you think about when you want to plan for a strategy, now let's move into our professional space. When you're a practice manager, a practice owner, or just a team leader, and you're looking to plan a new strategy for your hospital, when have you decided to do it just because it feels good? There's always some amount of financial data that is associated with it. And most of us either share our numbers with our team in some capacity, and hopefully in today's presentation, you'll definitely feel like you have more confidence in why you want to do it and how to go about doing it. And for those who kind of still may live in a little bit of with your blinders on, that no, we don't need to share numbers with our team. I want to remind you that your team actually already knows and already has access to a lot of number-driven data on your practice. Our clinical team members, our veterinary assistants, our technicians are usually heavily involved with building your estimates and treatment plans. Your doctors are definitely involved in speaking with the clients, whether they want to or not. They're going to be involved with speaking with the clients about how much a certain set of services are going to be, as related to the results of the exam or the diagnostics they want to run or have run. And definitely our client service team is very much aware of your clinic numbers, because not only are they making appointments, but they're also charging out your clients. So they're seeing a lot of these financial transactions already. We're just going to talk about how does all of that come into play. So instead of having each of those type of team groups be siloed in their space where they feel like they're only getting one perspective of what these financial numbers mean, we're going to try to tie everything together. So financial transparency will definitely both impact the culture and your operations of your team. And hopefully after this, you'll see how it will be for the better. What actually is financial transparency? Most people just say it's open book management. Now, that's a big concept. It's a very broad concept. So today we're going to dive into a couple different elements, and also how you're going to think about implementing it in small steps and in large steps. At the end of the day, it's about being open and having some clarity into your financial practices, and then inviting other people on your team into your business operations. So there's a couple of different elements for it. You want to be willing to share, and you're also actively going to be inviting your team into it. Now, it's not an all or nothing situation. It's open book management does not mean you reveal every single element of your practice and every single piece of financial data. So we will start with defining what the scope of that information you want to share within your practice and with your teams. So the components that we need. So we need to know how much and how often we're going to be sharing that information. We're going to break down these next couple of bullet points in the following slides. Financial literacy means we're going to teach our teams how to read the financials. So we're also going to be focusing on increasing your own financial literacy, because you need to be a source of not expertise, but of credibility. We're going to talk about agile financials, and that is focusing on timely or real-time data and the interest and willingness to be responsive in your planning. Radical transparency means that we're going to widen that access to your financial data. We're going to do it intentionally. So again, it's not an all or nothing situation, but it is radical because this is not really conventional and common in our veterinary medical spaces. Open dashboards, I think most practice managers have probably been KPI obsessed over the last several years. So we're going to talk about how organizing our metrics will impact your team, and you'll need to focus on how to organize and identify those metrics by the audience that you're sharing it with, as well as the impact that you want to bring to the table. And then we'll wrap that all up with this is kind of this is what open book management means. So first, teaching your team financial literacy. You can't get to the finish line by teleporting to the end. So as much as we want to say, hey, I just want to skip all the way to the end point, Grace, and I want to be able to have my employees really appreciate that that every dollar that comes into the practice gets divided into these ways. Well, let's actually take a step back, because having that talk in itself is a big leap in perspective. So let's start with yourself. Be honest with where your financial literacy is. If that is an area that you don't feel confident in, that's okay. There's so many resources that are available, whether it is one-on-one tutoring with a professional similar to myself, whether it's leaning on finance professionals that are already part of your practice, such as a bookkeeper or a CPA, or maybe your practice owner. If you're the practice owner and you're struggling to truly understand some of your financial statements, it's okay. Let's be honest with that and get your working knowledge up to speed. It's not about being expert. It's just helping identify where the areas that you need to build your education to feel like you have a solid foundation. Now, when it comes to yourself as well as your team, start using the same language and do it consistently. I think it's very common in our medical practices that we have, new hires that come in who don't have veterinary medical experience. So we know that it's really important to start teaching them certain terminology, like, well, what's HGE or what's ADR? Those are little acronyms. But we also want to talk about, like, well, the cat who's straining in the litter box is not straining in the litter box to poop. Same as how we are teaching our newer members to our teams some of that foundational medical knowledge. I want you to apply that same tactic to learning the financial jargon and using that amongst your team members, so that again it becomes comfortable and it becomes very common, and you're using the same language. So if you haven't picked up on it yet, what I'm implying is that your personal finance education is a main element that you need to start with. So those elements of how each of your team members manage their home life will be will help determine the ability for them to engage with you at work in the professional space on how you want to share financial information that is your business side to them, and how that's going to be a symbiotic relationship. So some of the examples that I'll make those connections for you is, if your employee only has a checking account and they don't have a concept of why they should have a savings account, that's going to maybe make it difficult for you to start talking about, hey, this is where We have an operating account for all of our practice expenses that happen every day versus we have a savings account or we need profit to put into the savings account in order to do something in the future or when something catastrophic or emergent happens, right? So when the roof leaks, we dive into our savings account in order to fix the roof. So if they don't have that concept in their personal life, it may be hard for them to appreciate that concept in the professional world. Same thing, another example is traditional versus Roth 401ks. Traditional is um, going to be your pre-tax dollars are going into this retirement plan. A Roth 401k account takes post-tax dollars into a retirement plan. Understanding the concept and the advantages and disadvantages of pre-tax versus post-tax dollars in your personal life helps you have an understanding of how a business functions with taking certain strategies that will maximize or minimize taxability liability concerns. So another example would be like fixed versus variable expenses. On our work side, on our practice side, our fixed expenses is rent, if as an example. Our variable expenses are the things that we order, our drugs and supplies, our COGS. In your personal life, that can be very similar, except your fixed expense may also look like rent or mortgage, but we don't have COGS in our personal life, but we do have grocery expenses. We want to go out to the movies and have an entertainment night. And we want to buy some new shoes, at the mall later this weekend. So those are your variable expenses. So understanding of what is fixed, what is variable, what is I must have versus I want to have, that helps understand the relationship between your personal finance and your professional finance. Last example is going to be about revolving debt and credit card usage. We have revolving debt and we definitely have credit card usage in our practices. And we definitely, almost everybody has that to a fair extent also in our personal life. Not all of us may have a mortgage or a bank or a car loan, but when you do, you understand that that is a requirement that you have decided to be obligated to repay that financial institution. For our veterinary practices, we can take out bank loans, we can take out lines of credit, we can also take out equipment leasing loans in order to purchase things. So that's a very different type of debt obligation versus a credit card usage. So tying how personal behaviors, or sorry, tying how your personal financial education will help translate into being able to talk about what's happening at the practice from a monetary standpoint, but then also tying how personal behaviors at work can actually impact your business and improve your business knowledge as well. So that as we go further on, we can, and you're having that discussion with your employees about, well, we want to change our COGS expense. Well, how do we do that? Well, let's look at our inventory, our kind of our pantry, right? Our practice pantry, our inventory shelf, and we no longer, are dispensing a certain medication anymore. We shouldn't restock it. So knowing how we can have these engagements with our team members and how they can fuel into the sustainability and the profitability of our practice. We got to start with being able to have these conversations with similar language and similar definitions. Now, what does Agile Financials look like, sound like? What does it mean? It's not about doing a handstand in your scrubs, though I think that was a really interesting image that came into my head because we sometimes we do feel like we're doing somersaults and cartwheels in practice when we're putting out all the different fires. But agile financials in this context, we're talking about being timely with our data, and it's very, very critical. So if you're pulling financial data that is from last year, it's still relevant to examine, but now it's the time has elapsed so much that we're really just doing it retrospectively, just for curiosity's sake. It's really not going to be something that can deeply impact what we're going to do this week or this month, and possibly not even how much we're going to be able to do this year. So whether you want to show your information in units, like we have this many active clients, or if we want to monetize it and say this is how much dollars this is worth, or that's the value of it, or as a percentage, or this is a combination of, we want to be able to display our financials in a way that is timely relevant. And it's not just about, hey, here's some financial data. We do want to emphasize that practicing an agile financials practice means that not only are you going to look at the data, you're also going to analyze it. You're going to make a plan of what you want to do with that information that is going to result in a better outcome. But now you not need to go about and execute that plan of action. So what that can actually look like, um, in a less esoteric way, is that you want to create those opportunities for small changes that actually do add up. So my examples for agile financials means that not only are you batching out your credit card terminal at the end of the day, you're running an end of day report in your PIMS. You're taking a look at not just, okay, I need to match up that all the credit card transactions, match with my PIMS and my credit card terminal, and all the cash that's in the drawer matches up with all the cash that got recorded in my PIMS, and so on and so forth. But it's also looking at the whole part of your end of day report, not just what category or type of payment you received that you're going to be looking at, but also where does that break down? What type of portions of your revenue came in from where? And we'll deep dive a little bit more in another slide. But another example with agile financials is looking at your COGS on a weekly basis, not on a monthly basis, not by one vendor, but we're looking at all your drugs and supply expenses on a weekly portion. What I've done in the past is have my front desk team be able to input into a Google spreadsheet, Google workbook type of setup every night that they're putting in their end of day report information. Had a couple different categories. I use that as a tool to not only do the end of day matching, but then in addition, I took that information and had like another column that would allocate a certain amount for COGS expenses for my inventory manager to purchase for the following week. That's not always the best way to create a COGS budget, but it was one way that she wanted to be able to see, how much money can I spend if I just look at what sales were generated last week. Another way to do it is, hey, this is how much we brought in every day for this week. This is the total. And then how much did we actually spend on COGS? Not your budgeted forward, but how much did you actually spend on your drugs and supplies that week? And then be able to see what's that percentage ratio between what you actually spent and what actually came in. So again, that's one way where it's like you don't have to have a giant meeting. It's just one of the areas where you're sharing very transparently with your team of how much money's coming in, how much money's going out. Agile financials, last one, is always the big expense item is actually our labor expenses. So agile financials could also encompass tracking overtime and meal penalties. So meal penalties are something that's a little bit more unique to California, but overtime, pretty much anybody, in the country is gonna be managing this portion. And if you are tracking it and also sharing it with your team members, That's an opportunity where you can engage them on being conscious of overtime and how that monetarily impacts the practice. Now, if you're not comfortable doing a total dollar number, because that might be too easy for people to decipher how much each person's getting paid, and you want to just kind of lump things together, like aggregate together, you can also do it as a percentage of the revenue. And I'll just let everybody know in a couple more slides, we will take a pause to take some questions. So if you do have questions, you can start putting them in the chat for Melissa to monitor, and then we're going to pause in a couple minutes to hopefully field any questions that you guys have so far. So another component of financial transparency is this concept called radical transparency. And I'll do this little plug right now. If you haven't come across Kim, I think it's Kim Scott. One of her first book was called Radical Candor. It's not specific at all to veterinary medicine. It's all about workplace relationships. Radical Candor, I think, is very similar to radical transparency. It's doing something that is creating a safe space and a positive space for people to be very honest with each other, not to not to not to push anybody down, but to be very frank with other team members. So in this case, on the financial side, looking at radical transparency is, and it's definitely radical to veterinary medicine, is to share this information beyond your ownership and management team. So what we're looking to achieve is trying to create that relevancy for all of our employees that is beyond their perspective of this is my paycheck and that's just it. So we're going to think about creating different tiers of information that they're going to be able to be engaged with, and what the management team may be seeing. They might be seeing units, dollars, percentages, all that kit and caboodle, versus somebody else in your team that is maybe newer to the team, doesn't have a lot of supervisory responsibilities, is not involved in team management. They are a vital role player, but they are more of a singular role player. Now they're still going to have some of that information, but it might look a little different. Maybe we're just going to see a percentage of something. And then they may not also see all the different categories. So what I like to do is breaking down not just, hey, this is all the revenue that came in and this is all the expenses that came in, but also creating like different subsections within. And so again, depending on certain team members with their areas of influence and involvement in the practice, you may give them more or less detailed information. So what does that actually look like? Let's say we'll take a percentage of our expenses and compare it as a percent of revenue for our non-management team. So that can look like, well, our COGS are right now at 21%, and we really want to get to 19%. So we're 2% off. Or our labor expenses at 45%, and we really want to get it down to 43%. So again, starting with some numbers with some relevance to each other, but not a ton of detail. Versus let's say our department managers, we want to give them a little bit more information. There is an admin team that's responsible for a bunch of stuff. We're comfortable sharing transparently with them. Hey, our rent is actually $20,000 every month, So to them, that's going to be a little bit mind-blowing, right? Because a singular person is probably not paying $20,000 in rent for their residential home. So for them to be able to recognize $20,000 for a business, that feels like a lot. And that may be substantial, or maybe just it's very within market, right? So they need to understand what $20,000 is relative to everything else. If you have an HR team, or a group of admin personnel or even department managers are going to be um, who are going to be involved with onboarding new hires and getting them situated with their employee benefits. Group medical premiums is a huge chunk of our employee benefit expenses. Group medical benefits, group medical premiums can range anywhere from $100 for a person to $700 per person, right? Depends on the plan, depends on the age, depends on which state you're in. When you start to see cumulatively what it takes for the practice to provide a group medical coverage to all team members that qualify, and you start to see that number, you're like, that's also a big number for an individual person. But again, we need to see what that looks like relative to all of our other expenses. When you can share with certain team members that are in that position to be influential, and you tell them, hey, our group medical premium as a whole, we have this many head count. We spend about $9,000 every month on medical premiums. We're coming up on open enrollment. We want to switch out to a different insurance carrier, or we want to pick some different plans because our current plan is set to automatically increase by 15%. What does 15% of $9,000 look like? That's a lot. That's a big jump because 15% for one person may not be a lot. 15% for 25 different individuals, is going to be a lot for that business to take on. So now this is why we're going to be shopping around, and we're going to go from, let's say we're going to go from Blue Shield to Aetna and maybe even look at Kaiser, right? Because all these different insurance groups are going to have different cost tiers. Or we're going to start offering a different type of plan, trying to be able to still provide this benefit to our employees, but also be able to manage that expense that we've committed to providing on behalf of those employees. Same thing with our merchant service fees. If it's an area that you're not tracking, you don't have to be religious about it every single month, but you should be taking a look at it. That's an area of opportunity that we can very transparently share with our team members at all levels, in my opinion, at all levels, to say, hey, every time somebody, pays with cash, cold hard cash, no problem. Because we have that cash in hand, nobody's taking a percentage out of it. If they're writing a check, are we looking at ensuring that check is not going to bounce? Because that does feel like cash in the moment, but if it's a fraudulent check or it bounces, now there's not only administrative headache, which includes time loss, but also now tracking down the client to pay for those services. Credit card payments or any of the lending, the credit lending services out there, Care Credit, Scratch, Cherry, All Pet Card, all these guys, wonderful ways to make certain funds accessible to our clients, but it does come at a cost to our business. So sharing that with our employees, it's not about, well, we want to pick one versus another because we're going to get hit with a smaller fee, but just to recognize that, hey, when that $5,000 treatment plan gets approved and they're going to run it under, they're going to either swipe their credit card, that's a Visa, MasterCard, or Amex, or whatever that is, or they're going to use a credit lending service like the ones I mentioned before. That's not 100% of that money doesn't come back to the clinic. It could be 2% gets taken off because it was a Visa card of some sort, or it could be 7 or 9% because we used one of the other credit lenders. That's a big chunk of money off of a $5,000 treatment plan. So those are areas where we can again share that information transparently with, in my opinion, anybody on our team. We can also generate a truncated profit and loss statement every month. So if you have enough of that financial data going into your bookkeeping and your accounting records, and you are being able to produce, a fairly accurate profit and loss statement, you don't have to show every single line item to every single employee. You can truncate that down, consolidate certain categories so that you can limit how much information you're sharing with your employees, but you are sharing that information and putting it into context for them. I also like to talk about whether we have positive or negative cash flow. So if you've come across any of my previous talks before, I'll share that you can have a positive outcome, which is your net income at the bottom of your profit and loss statement or your income statement for the month, but you may actually have negative cash flow for that same period, that same month, because that positive net income was then used to pay for some loan obligations. So again, back to equipment financing, bank loans, lines of credit. Those are monies that need to be paid to those financial institutions because we went into an agreement with them. But you're not going to see it on the P&L, but it still needs to be paid. The next aspect of financial transparency is bringing in open dashboards. KPIs, stands for key performance indicators. So it's something that is going to be unique to your practice that may not necessarily be cookie cutter from other practices. I like to emphasize that because the KPIs that resonate the most with the rest of your team outside of an ownership or management perspective is going to be things that tie back into your practice culture, your mission, and your values. That feels a bit ambiguous, but if your KPIs are just full of how much sales came in and how much money was spent on labor, that may not actually tie into something that resonates with your employees that you want to share your dashboards with. So pick things that are meaningful to them. So if you are a practice that is really, really into geriatric care, everybody is really like invested in learning about senior wellness and geriatric chronic diseases, and that's kind of like where your personality is, then your KPIs probably are not going to be about how many puppy and kitten vaccines you're running, but you may want to do a KPI for how many senior wellness panels you're running or how many 3-view chest x-rays you're running on 8-year plus dogs and cats, for example, or how many blood pressure reads are you doing for your hypertensive cats. So think about KPIs that really tie back into the personality of your practice. I like to not only track new services that you're wanting to introduce and you want to see that, hey, we promoted something or we started a new initiative, we put some marketing behind it, we did some team training behind it. Obviously, you want to see whether or not all of that paid off and performed well and gave you some monetary returns. But I do like to pick at least one thing that's a lagging service that we've identified is still core to our business or is very impactful to our values, but we're seeing that we're just not doing very much of it. That can help determine whether or not we need to either change that service, we need to increase our marketing and promotion and education on that particular service, or we actually might need to just drop it because it's no longer very relevant. So you do want to make sure that your KPIs, just like with agile, agile financials, same concept is you want to be able to do timely information, but with KPIs, you also want to be cognizant of being accurate and applying a consistent methodology for your data collection. What does that actually mean? It means 1 month, if you're pulling your PIMS report and you're looking at the first of the month to the 31st of the month, your next PIMS report is not going to be from the 1st of the month to the 28th of the month, unless it happens to be February. You don't want to change certain parameters and values that is going to dramatically skew the outcome of that data, that may result in an incorrect interpretation. So if a particular PIMS report I'm going to pull, and I'm just going to pull for all providers, and in that particular period I had a bunch of relief doctors, but then the next report I had some relief doctors, but mostly most of my full-time doctors, but in that report I excluded all of my relief doctors, even though there were only a few relief doctors. Now that's going to change things, because that first month I looked at every single veterinarian that was attributed to us to any type of sales, and in the next period I pulled only some. Right? In my head, I may have justified, well, I had a bunch, and, those were all replacements. But then in the second one, really, I just had a few shifts here and there that were really, no, let's keep those definitions and those parameters consistent. If I'm going to pull all doctors for 1 month, I'm going to always be pulling all doctors, regardless of if they are full-time employees or their relief report employees or part-time doctors. They're all going to be included. Also make sure that you're sharing with your team what that definition is, especially if you're using abbreviations or little jargon, but also to define what you may assume everybody knows what you're talking about. So some of the things I will typically deconstruct with some practice manager is, what's your definition of an active client? Right? And what's your PIMS definition of an active client? If you're using the PIMS as a means of just auto-generating a particular report, understand, what does that mean to them? For one PIMS, it may be clients are always active until you choose to deactivate that specific account or profile. Other PIMS may have built in like, hey, we're going to automatically assume that an inactive client is somebody who hasn't made any financial transaction with you in the last 3 years or greater than 3 years, right? So what does that active client or active patient actually stand for? If a patient buys, if a client buys one over-the-counter product and it got assigned to that patient, and that was the only transaction in the last 5 years, is that patient still an active patient? That's not for me to tell you which way it is. That's for you to determine, okay, this is what our practice is going to is going to create the rules of what this terminology means. That includes lapsing clients and patients. What does active ACT, active client transactions, means? Again, some PIMs will take every transaction. Other PIMs have a little bit more customization, and you can exclude a bunch of over-the-counter sales, or non-medical services and non-medical goods sales from ACT calculations. Or in the case of dental compliance, if we're going to want to track, okay, what's the percentage or how many dogs or cats we've had this month that have been compliant with their dental recommendations. If you're offering, in addition to anesthetic dentals, if you're also offering non-anesthetic dental services, does that count as compliance or non-compliance, right? So again, create those definitions for your practice, and make sure that you're talking about that very openly and regularly with your employees, that you're having these open dashboards, open these KPI kind of shared information with, that we're all talking about the same thing. I love to use like a shared drive or a Slack channel where some of that information gets dropped, so that nobody feels like they are excluded, that they have to be on some sort of in club to be able to see these documents or this type of data. You could also create a newsletter, kind of a pre-template newsletter. You drop it in, then it gets emailed out or shared out to your employees, where you don't have to feel like that in these days, we have to wait for like a team meeting to happen or something more formalized. I also like to look at building client profiles. So though these KPI dashboards, it's not always just about a monetary amount. It could also be a profile that then we can interpret what that potential monetary value is going to be. So when client profiles can be, we're looking at, do we have what percentage of our clients are going to be retirees versus non-retirees. I had one practice that was near a military base, and once they started to track the profile of their clients, they were able to see that they have almost a 50-50 split where the 50% of their clients were retirees. They're really good and highly compliant on their recommendations and long-term treatment plans. We're talking about like, the pets that have become diabetic or they're on thyroid medication and or they're cushingoid and they're needing regular workup. And the other 50% actually turned out to be active military personnel. And guess what? Those people don't stick around for 10 years. They, by the nature of their profession and their lifestyle, because of their profession, they move. And so you could look at your whole practice and say, wow, we've got all these clients who are non-compliant with their annual blood work or their 3-year vaccines or that blood panel that we wanted to do because we identified chronic disease. Well, when 50% of your clientele is very transient, it's going to look like you have a non-compliant client base, but it actually turns out they're actually not able to be actively participating in your practice after a certain amount of time. So just kind of being aware of what your client profiles look like can really help you understand where your financial opportunities are, but also where you may inadvertently interpret your data incorrectly. I also like to look at high and low volume days or hours whenever possible, so that's something that can be tracked either through certain phone services or even in your PIMS program as your team is marking them as arrived, and what time did they arrive for check-in to their scheduled appointments, if that's the case, or even if you're a walk-in type of setup, you can also track that as what time do people walk in, how long do they wait before they're examined and they're discharged. So you can start to take a look at those options because then that can help with some decision making on either staffing as well as targeted marketing. For GP practices that are not emergency, services, being able to see how many walk-ins and urgent care exams you're getting can be also an opportunity to track where your time allocation is being spent, where that's not being fit into your scheduled day, and then being able to share that information with our employees so that can maybe lead to active conversations on scheduling shifts, scheduling breaks, when lunch rotations happen, how do lunch rotations happen? Because again, we have an idea of our high and low volume days of the week or certain hours of the day, and also if we have any type of trend that we can see on walk-in and urgent care situations. My mouse keeps on falling asleep. So, last slide, and then we'll take questions. There's more content, but I wanted to break halfway in between for some questions. So, kind of like to put everything get together, it's about open book management. So again, it seems like a simple phrase, but what does that actually mean? I'm talking about we want to share more, but we don't just stop there. We want to really be talking about engaging with with teaching and training for our team members. We want them to care, but we also we want them to recognize how their actions will impact them directly, and then cumulatively how their actions impact the practice. While we want them to be more accountable, what we also want to supplement that is to empower our teams to act, that they can actually move things forward, and it's not just on the responsibility of the ownership or management to make some of these changes, or even to just interpret what some of these financial and data metrics are going to show us. And then planning decisions should be financially aligned with your practice goals. What that really drills into the heart is that your your decision planning is not going to be on what just feels good. Of course, you'd like to make those decisions with that in mind, but you all want to feel confident that the decision you're making is also leading to the goals that you have set. So what can that actually look like logistically? Weekly, you can have some KPI huddles. Monthly, you can share profit and loss statement snapshots. Again, the truncated information for those that don't need to see every single line item. Setting some quarterly financial goals and sharing that with the team. Hey, this is what our goal is for the next quarter, or hey, we were able to meet this goal last quarter. Giving them that feedback on how their involvement and their behaviors have added to the success of the practice. And then annually, you should be providing a performance review, deep dive with ownership stakeholders and management stakeholders, but you should also be able to confidently share some of that annual information with your team as a whole. So I'll stop right there before moving on to the second half of the presentation in case there are questions.
So Liz Macon had, when you were talking about the retired clients at that hospital being the really most compliant, her comment was that her retired clients are the least compliant population at her hospital, which I thought was funny. And I don't know if there's any other questions or not in the chat. I did have a statement and a question.
Okay.
One was reinforcing when you mentioned that some team members have access to information, right? Like all the receptionists that do any event end of day, they see how much you bring in. So when they see all this information, but they don't have any context of what goes out. So they have this assumption that all that money goes into your pocket as the owner. And that's not true because we all know where the money goes out everywhere. So I love the idea of sharing percentages or some information with them to help them make that relevant because they're already seeing what you're bringing in. You can't hide that. And
Right, absolutely.
because you can grow as a team if you have this. So I love the concept of this. In fact, I took a picture of your open book management because I love this slide. And then my question, I do have a question though. So you were talking about the active clients. So I've worked with several softwares that have that active client is only the one that you haven't inactivated yet. So how would you suggest if someone has that PIM software that does not have any other credentials or way of not credentials, but whatever, any other ways of distinguishing that, what should they do? If their software only says that you're either inactive or active based on what I said, how would you say they do that? If that question makes any sense. Sorry.
Yeah, so there's certain things that I like to do that's on a time, like there's certain times of the year that certain things get done. So in my head, around this time of the year, I start thinking about budgeting for practices for the upcoming year. At the end of the year, in December, we're looking at identifying all of our really stale ARs and writing them off as business losses. We want to do that at the end of the year. That's also a good time, either at the end of the year or at the first of the year, where you want to take a look at active, inactive clients. If you need to manually or kind of more detailed identify which of your clients are considered either lapsing or are inactive. It's kind of like end of the year, beginning of the calendar year is a good reset button. Pick that. If that doesn't work for you because you've got a lot of end of the year closing duties, like there's a lot of things to do and around December 31st, January 2nd, then pick another point in time that makes sense to your practice. So if you have a slow period, if you consistently have a slow period in February, maybe you want to do all of your kind of client, updating then, but we're doing a lot of our financials, in at the end of December, for example, and we're doing our inventory counts at the end of December.
Thank you.
All right. So keep sending in any questions into the chat, and Melissa will um, grab them for me at the end. I've got a couple more slides for you guys. So for those that can hang out with us a little bit longer, please do. For those that can't, I believe Melissa will be making this recording available for
Yes.
all registered.
Yes, it will be on my YouTube channel sometime next week. I'm going to Chicago this weekend for HawkCon, so we'll not be doing it this weekend. But before you move on, Liz did have a quick question. She said, if we deactivate those old clients, they won't hear from us again when we send out blast marketing emails. What would be a good solution to be able to maintain contact, but then also give accurate data, knowing that they're not actively spending money with you?
That might be more something that is PIM specific. So I would definitely work with your specific PIMS provider and ask them that question, because they may or may not have a tool in there that can help you with that. Um, it's not my area of expertise, so definitely putting me on the hot seat to think creatively. There's always the old school method of just creating a list on your own, and adding them to whatever your marketing, email blasting, outreach, snail mail, postcard system is that you still want to use. But it may be something else that is more creatively accessible that I can't really think of right now. That may be specific to your software program, or also to if your external marketing program. So if you're using a widget or a software platform or a third-party vendor to do that, maybe they have an intermediary solution for you as well. Cool. Very cool question. Sorry, I don't have a straightforward answer. So now that we kind of understand all the different components of being able to provide or to be able to engage in financial transparency with teams, I just want to review why is it beneficial to our teams. When we share the thing that we seem to default to being uncomfortable with and we as a general population, it naturally feels like we're bridging with whoever we're sharing the information with. And with our employees, that they do see it as you trust them to share this information. And it also starts to enhance any type of coaching culture that you're building in your practice, because it's just another area where it's more than let me teach you how to place a catheter, or let me role play with you on how to de-escalate a anxious client. But now we're also creating an area where we're coaching them on how to understand certain financial concepts, and hopefully that feeds back into their personal life. So just like before, when I said, you know, the individual employee benefits, is able to grasp these business concepts if they're practicing some elements of financial literacy in their personal life. At the same time as you're building their financial literacy in the workplace, hopefully that is also going to enhance their personal life financial literacy as well. So it goes both ways. When you create that shared language, you can start also using it for accountability, because now it's less about, well, my manager doesn't like me because she just doesn't like my attitude. No, well, my manager is concerned that I'm not performing to my best because I am responsible for this part of operations in our practice, and she and or the management team can see that this area is lapsing. This is underperforming. We're not bringing in the revenue that we thought we were going to be able to generate. So having that accountability conversation becomes a less emotional driven, um, and not assuming that there's any character sabotaging. We're talking about dollars and cents in a little bit more black and white space. We're also encouraging collaboration, and we're asking our employees, hey, we're inviting you to be solution oriented, and we are inviting you to contribute. What are your ideas if we want to bring in more compliance to our retirees? What are you hearing or in the exam rooms or hearing in the lobby that may help um, us to convey, not just the necessity, but also the long-term value, um, and the positive outcome that that will be for the person and the pet. Um, when we share our financial data, we're also helping them to start building that ownership mentality. I don't think any employee is ever going to feel like an owner until they're actually a business owner, but they're starting to hopefully understand that there's a lot of complex moving parts and there's a lot of responsibility on the ownership stakeholders and the management team to keep the lights on and keep the doors open. The best thing I love about bringing in financial transparency to our veterinary medical teams is that we're encouraging ourselves and themselves, the whole team, to be a bit smarter and less emotion driven with our planning and decision making. And when we have timely data, we also now can make faster, more relevant decision making. Because when we don't, we risk a couple of different areas. We can start to we can not be able to identify certain inefficiencies because somebody along the way is really emotionally tied to a particular set of services or goods or whatever it is. How many times has, one of your doctors gone to a conference and they got super excited about buying some new shiny gadget or tool? They came back and they're like, you gave me a spending budget, I bought this, right? And now for like the next 7 years, they're like, no, like this is great. This was great, And then you're looking at the financials and you're like, but nobody ever opts in for that service. We're paying for this tool, or we already paid for this tool, but we've yet to like recoup that investment. So sometimes when we're sharing that financial information, we can we can decouple the emotional aspect from the actual financial outcome. Our team can feel really excluded, just like what Melissa had said earlier. They see bits and pieces, but they may not see how it relates to each other or how it is part of a bigger picture. And so from their perspective, they're just kind of like, well, I see this, and I'm going to make these assumptions that the practice can afford it because we just took in $6,000 for the day. That's like 10 times more than my rent. So, I mean, obviously, like the business is rolling in the dough. And we just assume, well, if they don't see it, like it's just a drop in the bucket. So if I take $20 off of the till or out of petty cash, my manager's never gonna know, or the owner's never gonna know. I can justify that, right? They can also start to think, well, I just work here. I'm not like I'm nobody. When you engage with them on your financial data, you're telling them, no, you don't just work here, you are a contributor, you impact us, you know, and no, the practice may not always be able to afford it. We definitely don't want somebody taking $20 from the till. We definitely don't want anybody to take, $200,000 from the practice, because that comes at a huge cost. So when we don't have multiple eyeballs, and different perspectives, as well as different interest levels, and motivations looking at our financial data, then there is that opportunity for somebody to take advantage of the situation, and there could be theft, fraud, or embezzlement that's happening. When there are big spikes in big or little spikes in the financial statements, if nobody else is looking for it, like it happened. By the time the owner is filing their corporate taxes, they can't undo it, right? They're trying to figure out with a forensic accountant what happened in the past. But when we're sharing financials on a regular basis, then hopefully somebody says, "Oh, wait, that doesn't make sense. I didn't do a bulk order with distribution that month. I did not make this giant vaccine order or anything like that. Why is our COG super high? Like that's a big spike from last month, or it's enough of a change in that spike that doesn't make sense to the person who is responsible for that lane. So definitely an area where you're gonna hopefully gain more than lose. I think at most we're the thing that we risk the most by not having financial transparency is maybe a little bit of embarrassment or self-consciousness on what's happening in our business. So can you just like, hey, sweet, I just did this webinar with Melissa and Grace. I'm gonna go all in um, on Monday morning. So I would say, hold on, let's do a little self-assessment. So I want to emphasize that when I talk about the team includes the owners and the management. The team is not everybody else except for. The team is everybody. So everybody has to be bought in. It starts with the owner. If whether you are a small corporate group or a privately owned practice, whoever is the ownership stakeholder needs to be bought in that this is something that they fully are going to back. Because if there's any hesitancy at the figurative top, there's still going to be mistrust in either the validity of the information, the motivation of why you're sharing that information to everybody else. Is there something else that you're trying to do a bait and switch on me, the I just work here employee? So it does have to include everybody. How often are you going to be generating the financial data, and what type of information are you going to be generating? Identify who's going to be performing this work. Conventionally, it almost always falls upon a practice a practice manager or an office manager of some sort. Typically, owners are not like getting their hands involved in actually pulling this information, even though they're looking at it, because now you have to be able to display this information for the rest of your team. So identify who's actually going to be performing this work. I like to spread things out so it's not just one practice manager or just one management team. Also invest in educating your team as individuals on these foundational concepts of financial literacy before you're moving into your business financials. So going back to every person, and not because they're the newest hire, lowest person on the ladder, you're going to assume that they're the least knowledgeable. You can have a very high wage earning individual in your practice, such as an associate doctor who does not have a good grasp on their financial literacy in their personal life, and they're also going to have a harder time understanding on how this relates to understanding business financials and kind of increasing your profitability. So when you do want to implement, you also want to share what your big picture is. So if you don't already have a 3 to 5 year strategic plan for your practice, this is a good time to also take that step back and do some introspection, map out a 3 to 5 year plan. You can go into all the things that you want to do in terms of how you're going to what type of clientele you're going to engage in, or maybe some more mission driven type of initiatives. But almost everything comes down to a monetary value of some sort. The things that are typically on a 3 to 5 year plan from a financial perspective is going to be your physical expansion or remodeling of the space, either relocation, or we want to purchase the next unit over to us in the strip mall, or we want to remodel and make this like 3 exam room into 4 exam rooms because we're going to reclaim some dead space in the back. Are we going to grow our team headcount? That comes obviously not as a labor expense cost, but we're also looking at employee benefits. So that's going to be a financial impact. Do we have equipment upgrades that either need to happen or that we want to happen? Definitely, we know that there are maintenance that happens on a regular basis, but we're talking about like bigger replacements. So is your digital x-ray plate going to be nearing its end of life? And you are going to need to replace that, or you want to replace it because the one that you currently have, the images don't look so great anymore, not getting a good diagnostic value out of it. I want to get what is newest and greatest coming out of digital imaging. Or are there new services that you want to plan for? Do you want to go, are you currently a kind of a kit and caboodle type of GP practice, but now you know that there is a need in the community for a high volume vaccine clinic that is not being accessible to your local area. So in addition to your GP practice, you want to start a high volume vaccine clinic under this business entity, but it's going to be, a pop-up once a month or something like that. So that's a new service that you want to share with your employees. Hey, we see this need in our community. This is how we want to contribute this, but we need to build up some financial capital in order for us to make that goal in a couple of years. So we got to put a price tag on things that we want to build towards. And so what Melissa alluded to earlier is, yes, like all this profit doesn't go into the pocket of our practice owners. The profit goes toward funding our future and also paying off any debts. All right. Now, how are we going to break down our financials? These are the ways that I would ask you to take a look at. Explain how your revenue is currently being generated, as well as how it's being spent. So what that means is, as the revenue that comes in, it doesn't go all into one bucket, or it doesn't come from one bucket. The revenue that you're bringing in, some of it's from your exams, some of it's from surgery, some of it is from vaccines, some of it's from pharmacy. So all these different categories can be, we can break out like these are your channels that are bringing in revenue. You can express this as dollars, as whole dollars, or as percentages. Again, depending on who your audience is, you may be more comfortable with one or the other, or wanting to show both. And then setting some annual goals by category. Here are categories instead of what our goals are for professional service and pharmacy sales. It's more about, this is what our category is for our goal for gross revenue. We are a $9 million practice. We want to get to $10 million. Our COGS are at 25% being spent on total revenue. We would like to bring that down to 19%, et cetera, et cetera. What's the difference between operations and administrative expenses? One example I'll give you is operations expenses may be like your rent, and some of your facility contracts. So like your IDEX quarterly maintenance agreement, versus administrative expense is going to be like, okay, these are the money I'm spending on my practice, my practice lawyer, our CPA, maybe a marketing campaign. And then translate all these goals into metrics, because you can talk about this revenue, you can talk about the annual goals by your category, but now you need to give your team something specific that they are going to work on that then feeds into the cumulative effect of this, right? Because if you just tell your inventory manager, hey, we want to go from 21% to 19%, go. That may feel very daunting to them. So we'll want to give them some specific metrics to work on. And this is part of your KPI dashboards, right? So some ideas are, hey, what's the number of wellness panels we want to do in this time period? And then once you track it for a couple of months, give yourself a goal of increasing that number to this much more. Or we want to be able to see what's the ratio of our dentals. Yes, we do a bunch of dentals, but how many of those dentals are we doing that are grade 1 versus grade 2 versus grade 3? You know, that can bring you a lot of insight into how where maybe we're not able to catch a lot of the grade 1 patients, and we're seeing a ton of grade 3. What does that mean for our clientele? Because now they're paying a much bigger bill at grade 3 than maybe we could have gotten had we been able to get more involved when it was a grade 1 dental. Again, overtime hours, huge for our labor expense. We might not be able to make much wiggle room on total wages if our doctors are on, on salary or on production, but then also our employees, like, we're not going to dramatically cut 5 people from a 20-person, roster just because our labor is out of whack. That may not be operationally feasible. So look at overtime hours. And one of the things that is, that is a soft spot for me is how much of your employee participation is in retirement plans. I think everybody now is either required to offer it or is actively offering a retirement plan in your hospitals as a business. So, but I've seen over and over again, the participation rate is really, really low. I've seen veterinarians who make, a good amount of salary not be participating. And I've also seen the just above minimum wage worker actually participating. And I want to say kudos to that person, because for every dollar they're putting in, they are probably getting an employee match. So they're getting free money, but they're taking advantage of the long-term investment that with compounded interest, that money's going to grow. So don't try to play catch up. That is something that your employee benefits. They won't feel it in the given year. They probably even won't feel it until several years down the line, and maybe by then they're not even an employee of yours. But from a personal level, that's like, it's always been like kind of kudos when I think back, like, oh, I'm so thankful that my employer did that for me, and I'm so thankful that I participate in that plan now. Now that's been a couple decades. All right, just last 2 slides. Again, reinforcing what does building participation and sharing our performance look like. I like to look at for how frequent you want to do your metrics. For weekly, we might be looking at total sales, and we might be looking at collected versus uncollected revenue, right? So we may have been able to collect 90% of everything that we invoiced out. Why does that number keep growing, or why is that consistently we're not collecting 10% of our sales? Maybe we're tracking total visits. On a monthly level, I like to look at percentages to revenue for our COGS and our labor expenses. Said that a couple of times. Quarterly, I'm interested in how much a positive cash flow was accumulated, because again, that extra cash is going into future plans and debt obligations. Now, the second component, yes, you can assign things to team members. They can do so much for you. You can delegate. Your inventory manager probably can be looking at your COGS spending, because, and granted, they're not able to impact all of the COGS spent, but the majority of the COGS spent does come from ordering of drugs and supplies. So your inventory manager is already naturally involved in your COGS spending. Get them access to be able to input some of that data in real time or in a timely fashion for you. Your CSR manager or your CSR team is already doing those daily transactions. They're doing the end of day reporting. if you have a CSR manager or a CSR lead, have them be involved with pulling that client data information, maybe identifying those inactive versus active clients for you, looking at payment data such as your merchant service fees and so forth. They're seeing bits and pieces of it. Give them that next bit of information so they can put more and more of those puzzle pieces together. None of that stuff is super sensitive, that I feel that it wouldn't I wouldn't be comfortable sharing that with other of my key team members. Um, Technician managers, technician leads, they're the ones that are performing all of the majority of our medical services. So have them track those, that they should be the ones that are much more intimately involved with how many cystos we're doing and how many, of these certain lab panels we're able to send out. And any member, but in particular, some that are in these specific channels, they can help you audit some of your bills. So again, that shouldn't be on the practice manager. So if your reference lab bill comes in and you've had a couple of months where things have not always lined up correctly, that doesn't have to be the practice manager or definitely not the doctors or the owners. Give that to one of the medical team members who are very comfortable navigating the PIM software, and they're like, yep, okay, Fluffy got the senior wellness panel check, and now they're starting to see this is how much each of these panels cost. That cost is just a portion of everything it is to deliver, be able to execute that panel for that patient, and that opens up another conversation of cost beyond just being able to order that one panel, right? You have mortuary bills from your crematorium service, for example. You don't have to do this every month, but if you feel like you need to spot check, that what you're getting billed by your vendor is actually you're also billing that to the client. You might not want to take it so far as like trying to hunt down that client if they forgot to pay you, but obviously the mortuary service is charging you. But to use that as ways to identify like where are you might be missing some charges within your team. So that's more of a team education operational efficiency. But when they start to help you audit that bill, that's one less thing for a management level to have to deal with, and that openly involves your team members. They know that they sent out 15 group cremations and we had 5 private cremations. They probably know all 5 of those pets. It's okay to share that information. Hey, this was the bill for last month. Did we actually receive that cedar box? Did we actually receive for this patient, for this pet, the specialty urn, because they charged us for that specialty urn? Did the owner actually receive their ashes back in that higher priced urn um, product? Also, your in-house analyzers, a lot of our in-house analyzers, they may bill us for charges per run. So aside from some of these analyzers, you won't be able to get a report on each of the individual patients, but for other analyzers you might. So again, that's an area where the bill comes in from the vendor. You can engage anybody on your team, especially somebody that is involved in that area of providing that service to the patient. They can be involved with auditing that bill for you. And then creating budgets. The example I love to give here on creating budgets, because budgets don't have to be overwhelming. You don't have to do everything in your practice. One of the areas that I really like is employee break room, restocking of snacks, and team lunches, team activities. So you don't have to figure out like your budget for everything under the sun, but I bet you if you could provide some guidelines for a budget, let's say we'll take the whole year for the employee break room. We're going to say, hey, we're going to budget out like $5,000 for the year to restock the break room over the next 12 months. All right. But now I'm going to empower somebody on the team, and maybe it'll be a rotating basis, right? You get January, you get February, you get March, and you get to help build that Costco bill, the Costco cart to restock. they not only get to be involved with picking out the snacks that they love, that they know that they're going to want, and they get to learn a little bit about each other. Like, oh, I really like all these chocolatey things. Oh, but I really liked all the salty, savory stuff. So you're going to have some variety. But also now that they're involved with the financial aspect of, and working within a budget, that means if one month they blow the budget and they spend like $200 over, that means next month the other person that's taking over or the same person that's doing the ordering is going to have to account for that overspending. So it's getting them to practice using that part of their financial brain of like, okay, I only have so much I can spend, and now I have to figure out what that looks like. Same thing for a whether it's if you do monthly, if you buy lunch for everybody, put a cap on it, empower somebody on your team, assign it to somebody on their team and say, hey, I'm going to let you pick, the caterer. This is how much you're going to be able to spend. Do not go $1 over, right? Or if there's a larger celebration meal or party at sometime during the year, get other people in your team involved. Hopefully they think it's fun. But at the same time, you're also coaching them on how to work within a financial guidelines. So lastly, what do you want to look at for your first steps as a leader to implement some financial transparency? Start thinking about doing a weekly dashboard of some sort. And then you'll want to add some of those financial metrics into your staff meetings and your daily huddles. Don't try to do everything all at once. Bring in how much frequency, depth, and diversity of that information you want to do. So you're going to build upon some of these smaller little behaviors by adding more richness to it. And then when you're on a regular cadence and everybody's feeling a little bit more comfortable with their kind of assignments and their areas of responsibility, and they're feeling more comfortable with using that language with each other, that next cool step is asking somebody on your team to explain one of your financial reports. Again, it's not about being expert, it's about just increasing their confidence on saying, hey, this is what I see, this is how I interpret it, this is I have some suggestions for us to do better. And they're starting to feel like they're truly a valued member of your organization. So with that, thank you so much for everybody that's hung out with us this far. Melissa, do we have any other questions or comments?
Um, no, not really. I just a couple of comments that I put in there, but
All right. So thanks everybody for spending the time with me and Melissa. I always like to offer for anybody that attends live. So only those of you who attended live, and Melissa will tell me
I
who
have
was
a
here.
list. Yeah, I have the list.
Yeah, you get an hour free coaching with me. We can talk about how you want to start implementing this in your practice if that's what you want to focus on. If you're struggling with some other financial matters that's happening in your practice and you just want to be able to bounce some ideas off of somebody, uh, that's what I'm here for. So you can redeem your 1 hour free coaching with me. I'll coordinate that with Melissa. And thanks so much, Melissa, for having me on your
Absolutely.
channel. This
Thank you
was
for
it was
coming.
fun.
Lots of great information. So thank you so much. And I get you lost some people, but you really kept a lot of them. So thank you guys for staying on. So we appreciate it. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day. This will be posted on my YouTube channel in the next week or so, so you can share it with anybody else. So everyone have a great Thursday, and I hope you all have a good weekend. So thank you. Chrissy says, thank you for the connection of personal life experience and budget work life is very intuitive. So yes. That's awesome. Yes, I appreciate that too. So thank you. And admin, whoever's admin on here, please email me because I don't know who you are, so I can't give you your CE certificate. So please let me know whoever it's named admin, so I can take care of getting that to you. So, all right, everyone have a great rest of your day. I'm going to go ahead and stop the